Try this for a moment. Imagine your entire day is a silent exam. Before breakfast, you've already been graded on how you rang the bell, how long you let the silence breathe, and how your shoulders negotiated those tight stays. That's the world of Victorian etiquette codes. Under gaslight halos and coal smoke air, the script of respectability ran on tiny signals. The rustle of silk in a doorway, the calling card snap on a silver tray, the clink of teaspoons pacing your voice. It sounds fussy, but here's the twist. Those social rules didn't just police you, they protected you, turning strangers into predictable characters and homes into safe stages. Tonight we're going to live inside that rulebook existence and feel how daily propriety choreographed every step, street to parlor, pew to platform, dance floor to desk. You'll learn how conduct culture quietly decided your chair, your laugh, even how far your hand could travel in a hushed drawing room. We'll decode respectability politics without putting you to sleep. A nod at home could be mercy, how gendered manners made touch legal, and where ritualized routine turned chaos into calm. By the end, invisible rules will stop feeling like chains and start reading like a map. First little edge you can pocket right away. Morning calls weren't in the morning. Arrive afternoon and leave at 15 minutes, unless begged to stay. Milk follows tea, not the other way, unless the house is Irish and smiling. And if you ever see a visiting card with the upper left corner folded, it means, I called in person. An envelope around the card whispers privacy. That's instant fluency, earned without opening Routledge's manual or Kessel's guide. We'll keep one eye on the paper empire that enforced it all. Etiquette manuals and period magazines that audited manners like ledgers, plus Mrs. Beaton's advice, turning kitchens into command centers. You'll hear how fussily prescribed behavior traveled by train, how a kid leather scent could keep gossip off your skin, and how decorum discipline bent. Bicycles, books, faster post, without breaking your name. Settle in, dim the room, and let the pace slow. This is boring history for sleep, but with enough texture to keep your mind purring. Doorways that test you, teaspoons that soothe you, and a century that made civility into a survival skill. If this is your kind of deep dive, tap like and subscribe so you don't miss the rest. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and what time it is right now. I read them, and I'll weave your places into the next chapter. You wake coal smoke air nibbling the window sash, and the room already has opinions. The rustle of silk from a gown on the chair sounds like a to-do list. Victorian etiquette codes are imprinted on your walls, yet they set your pulse. Daily propriety starts before speech. How you rise, how you ring, how you breathe. Gaslight halos fade, but the script of respectability stays lit in your head. You stretch, then remember tight stays will do the stretching for you. At the dressing table, your hands consult conduct culture disguised as toiletries. A brush becomes a compass, a pin, a promise not to stray. Mrs. Beaton's advice whispers order, while Routledge's manual frowns at shortcuts. Kessel's guide waits on the shelf, patient as a chaperone. Etiquette manuals don't shout. They hum. So you tune yourself to their key. Rule-bound living begins with buttons that must look like certainty. Clothes aren't fabric. They're sentences you'll be forced to read aloud. Tight stays rephrase posture into I am reliable whether you are or not. Kid leather scent of gloves tells touch to mind its manners. Fussily prescribed behavior even edits color. Bright says gossip, matte says peace. Respectability, politics peers from the mirror, auditing hem, cuff, and courage. You nod at yourself like you're signing a contract with the day. Breakfast is a soft tribunal with tea. The clink of teaspoons sets a tempo. No opinions faster than the sugar dissolves. Social rules seat elders first, and your anecdotes second. Kessel's guide says butter small, not brave. Never saw bread like a fence. In this regimented life, a napkin becomes Switzerland for crumbs. The servant's quiet competence reminds you decorum discipline works downstairs too. For the door, a pocket ritual. Cards counted like heartbeats. That calling card snap is your passport stamp to hushed drawing rooms. Period magazines stacked in the hall teach the weather of conversation. Conduct literature warns. Morning calls aren't morning. Arrive after noon. Leave before comfort. Rule book existence turns distance into meaning. 12 minutes is warmth, 30 is worry. You tie your bonnet and practice the smile that doesn't start fires. Street rules don't need a throne to rule you. Umbrella tilt, says pardon, without syllables. Pace says, purpose, not panic. Women nod by degree. Men lift hats like commas, not exclamation marks. Gaslight halos linger in shop windows. You measure yourself against their glass. Daily propriety hates hurry unless it's for charity or rain. Coal smoke air writes your hem in grayscale footnotes. The first doorstep is a quiz you can pass only once. Card tray visible. Good. Language you speak. A footman becomes punctuation. You place your name between his commas. Upper left fold signals presence. Envelope whispers privacy. You haven't earned yet. Routledge's manual would clap if manuals had hands. You retreat precisely 15 minutes later, feeling taller by half an inch. Back home, the letter desk is your quiet battlefield. Ink bottled like patience. Paper thick enough to carry sincerity. Etiquette manuals ask, thank promptly, decline kindly, promise narrowly. Period magazines have columns on refusals that don't bruise. Respectability politics grades penmanship when it can't grade income. You sign, sand, seal. Your calm outweighs your calendar. Errands in the city require costume changes of tone, not cloth. Shop counters prefer soft requests that know their own price. Gendered manners put wit on a leash, but not in a cage. Conduct culture nods if you praise workmanship before bargaining. Rule-bound living says coins should sound like raindrops, not thunder. You exit with dignity, wrapped in brown paper and string. Library hour is the quiet twin of a salon. Hushed drawing rooms become hushed reading rooms with sterner chairs. Cassell's guide approves of improving texts. You borrow something delicious anyway. Period magazines rustle like tame gossip you're allowed to enjoy. Daily propriety says eyes on pages, not neighbors. Still, you notice shoes. In this ritualized routine, curiosity wears gloves and whispers. Afternoon tea returns you to the domestic court. Clink of teaspoons again. Your leitmotif for surviving the day. Guests sit where conversation can find them without pouncing. Mrs. Beaton's advice floats through pastries. Crumbs are stories, keep them small. Social rules ban heroics at the sugar bowl and tragedies at the milk. You pour steadily, and the room borrows your rhythm. Evening asks for more theatre and fewer mistakes. Gaslight halos turn everyone into their own best. Footnote. Etiquette manuals choreograph introductions. So opinions arrive dressed. Respectability politics hovers like a footman no one hired. Fussily prescribed behavior makes laughter walk on soft paws. You exit words before they outstay their welcome. Night loosens the laces, but not the lesson. You catalogue the day's tiny victories. 6 good sips, 2 neat bows. Rulebook existence hasn't killed you. It taught you where the floor creaks. Conduct culture is heavy, but now you can lift it without grunting. Coal smoke air thins as the fire sighs, and your shoulders follow. Tomorrow's script of respectability is already scratching at the door. You learn quickly that a Victorian home runs on choreography as much as coal, and you are the quiet conductor. Servants take their cues from your tone, your timing, and a dozen silent signals drilled by daily propriety. The bell pulls are your baton, 1 ring asks. 2 rings insists, and 3 rings means something's on fire. Preferably not the pudding. Etiquette manuals warn you to be exact, without being theatrical, because rule-bound living hates drama at breakfast. You discover that a well-timed pause can command more than a raised voice. Under gaslight halos, authority looks like calm hands and sentences that end before they fray. Start the morning by translating needs into lists, not size, because conduct culture prizes clarity. Mrs. Beaton's advice insists order saves more than thrift, and she's right when the bakery delivers early and the coalman arrives late. Cassell's guide adds the soft law that praise travels farther than scolding. So you praise publicly and correct where the wallpaper can keep a secret. Respectability politics listens for sarcasm, so you never let it hitch a ride on your instructions. A ledger for supplies and a second for favors keep friendships separate from invoices. That's decorum discipline, kindness with a spine. In the kitchen, you're fluent in temperatures and tact, because this is where regimented life meets human appetites. The cook wants decisions before the oven decides for you, and your choices must satisfy guests' budgets and Mrs. Beaton's portion math. You approve a soup that forgives lateness and a roast that forgives conversation, because social rules will stretch both. You check the scullery because clean plates argue for your character long before your anecdotes do. Conduct literature reminds you to taste salt with the tip of a spoon, and opinions with none at all. The clink of teaspoons becomes your morning metronome. Upstairs, linen has politics, and you vote with starch. Gendered manners demand pillowcases that behave, and towels that don't hoard damp, while period magazines swear by sunlit lines and good pegs. You count sheets like coins because thrift is the quiet twin of elegance. Tight stays may pinch you, but tight schedules pinch your staff, so you plan mending on lighter days. A rulebook existence means repairing hems before they become headlines. You keep a mending basket near the window where the coal smoke air won't argue with thread. Hiring and references are their own courtroom, and you're both counsel and judge. Routledge's manual advises you to read letters between the lines. Steady means honest, clever sometimes means slippery, and quick can mean either. You ask practical questions, boots, windows, chilblains, because fussily prescribed behavior collapses when the weather gets teeth. You learn to choose character first, skill second. Knives sharpen faster than tempers. Respectability politics loves a household that runs with fewer words and more rituals. A good hire lowers the volume of the house by half. Communication must be crisp enough to survive stares. You write short notes, inked, dated, folded, to travel between floors without losing temperature or tone, because hushed drawing rooms hear everything. Etiquette manuals suggest verbs over adjectives: lay, fetch, air, polish, not nicely and quickly, which only breed confusion. When tasks collide, you triage by guests, heat, and perishables, not by volume of complaint. In rule-bound living, the best apology is prevention plus pie. You let gratitude circulate like warm air, quiet, constant, and felt before it's named. Timing is the secret hinge of the whole structure. Breakfast at 9 means coal at 7, kettle at 8, and your voice at exactly neither, and everyone knows it because you keep it. Cassell's guide reminds you that punctuality is love, translated into minutes. The hallway clock becomes a small parliament where bells, boots, and trays debate the day. You broke a peace with a schedule that bends for weather and never for whim. In a regimented life, reliability is the most persuasive accent. Discipline happens, but it doesn't echo, because the walls have ears and neighbors have period magazines. Conduct literature sets a rule. And give specifically, not vaguely. You replace a complaint with an instruction and add a second chance with a date on it. When dismissal must happen, you keep it brief, paid, and unprintable. Respectability politics is merciless to sloppy endings. A clean reference for honest service is your last good deed in the matter. Guests test the engine you've built, and you want the hum, not the rattle. The afternoon brings callers into hushed drawing rooms, where the rustle of silk sets the treble, and the coal fire keeps the bass. You post a day's staffing plan as neatly as a menu, because the doorway is a stage, and the footman is your prologue. The calling card snap signals who needs tea, who needs tact, and who needs both. Etiquette manuals say a good hostess is a swan. Your legs may churn, but the surface reads, glide. Everyone leaves suspecting you did nothing, which is the point. Money is the ghost at every table, and you exercise it with columns. You track coal by sack and sugar by pound, because the cheapest loss is the one that never entered the kitchen. Mrs. Beeton's advice tells you to weigh generosity, not guess it. So you portion kindness like cake, enough for each guest, a little for the pantry, and none for the bin. Routledge's manual frowns on credit that reaches past the fortnight, so you settle swiftly. Respectability politics can smell unpaid jam from 2 streets away. Your receipts are love letters to tomorrow's self. Accidents will audition. A scorched sauce, a missing key, a lamp with opinions. You rehearse recoveries the way dancers rehearse bows, replacing panic with procedure. A spare key lives where the cat can't find it. A second source lives on a cooler flame. A fresh wick stands by like an understudy. Art culture says elegance is mostly repetitions done kindly. When something breaks, you sweep, you apologize, and you change the topic before shame multiplies. The house learns your rhythm and copies it. By evening, machine exhales, and you take stock while the hallway settles. You praise what went right out loud, and write what went wrong in small, legible script for tomorrow's fix, because learning is the last duty of the day. Period magazines lie ready for 5 minutes of borrowed mind, and the etiquette manuals wait like old aunts who always preferred you steady to perfect. You breathe, loosen what can be loosened, and let the gaslight halo soften the edges. Tomorrow's chapter moves the choreography from home to street. Omnibuses, shop counters, and the public script of respectability where strangers grade your steps. Step outside and the city starts marking you to size. Coal smoke air writes a grey autograph on your hem. Gaslight halos linger, even by day in shop windows. And Victorian etiquette codes wake up the moment your boot hits the curb. Daily propriety decides your pace. Purposeful, never panicked. And your eyes, observant, never greedy. The rulebook existence follows you like a second shadow. How far apart to walk, when to nod, which doorway grants a right to linger. Conduct culture isn't louder outdoors, it's simply everywhere. Pavements have lanes you can't see, and everyone else can. Routledge's manual would tell you to keep right, avoid abrupt halts, and never force a lady to step off the stones into muck, even if her boots could survive it. Umbrellas behave like fencing foils. Points high, angles courteous, tips never weaponized. Indeed manners choreograph small passes, men to the gutter side, women guarded from splashes. So no apology has to work overtime. Respectability politics cares less about your coat than the courtesy it implies at 2 paces. Street crossing requires a nose for tempo. Cabs cut diagonals, drays drag their own weather, and the horse that looks philosophical will spook at a handcart's rattle. Cassell's guide swears by eye contact with the driver and a hand signal that's more sentence than shout. In this regimented life, you don't sprint. You claim a gap with poise and keep moving. If a gentleman offers an arm, you thank him like a bridge you already planned to cross. Decorum discipline is grace at traffic speed. Omnibuses are hushed drawing rooms on wheels with less upholstery and more opinions. Ladies enter first, then elders, then men. Parcels tuck under benches, not under feet with ankles attached. Coins pass quietly. Raindrops, not hailstones. And your destination is a simple noun, not a story. Social rules forbid loud courtship and public grievances. Conduct literature recommends weather, books, or the state of the roads as safe conversation. A shared smile at a pothole is permissible. A shared life in row 3 is not. Rule-bound living rides top deck only if the hatpins agree. Hansom cabs offer speed with footnotes. You signal with presence, not flailing. State the address cleanly and the route only if needed, because drivers prefer streets to lectures. Respectability politics side eyes an unaccompanied young woman at midnight, so you travel with an aunt, a friend, or the heir of someone whose name the doorman knows. When you alight, coins meet palm like secrets. Never stage money. If the horse snorts on your hem, you treat it as weather, acknowledged, not dramatized. Fussily prescribed behavior is mostly angles and timing. Shops have their own constitution. You don't pour the goods. You ask, admire, and decline with a sentence that can survive being repeated by the counter. Returns travel by note first, then by person. The paper trail keeps everyone's dignity in stock. Mrs. Beaton's advice loves exact lists, but the best list is tone. Calm, specific, grateful for honest work. In a rule-book existence, the shop bell is a gavel. When it rings for you, enter like a case you will win with courtesy. The rustle of silk should whisper good news, not prices. Department stores reinvent the map of permission without tearing it. Elevators are little theaters of silence. Eyes front, hat steady, conversation thin as cable. Mirrors multiply your posture, reminding tight stays to hold court without cruelty. Tea rooms inside are a clever loophole. The clink of teaspoons makes rest look respectable, and period magazines on side tables let you loiter under the flag of culture. Respectability politics approves when leisure resembles learning. A pair of gloves tried on becomes a lesson in kid leather scent and self-control. The post office is where conduct literature meets caffeine. Queues are straight lines, not crowds with ambitions. Letters face one way. Stamps are bought with decisions already made. Telegraph forms reward brevity that still sounds human. Routledge manual would applaud, delayed by fog. Stop calling tomorrow. 2. Postcards carry weather and wishes. Letters carry sentiment. Secrets wait for ink with edges. Calling card snap you used at doors works here too. Order, stack, seal, and let the machine turn paper into consequence. Reading rooms and museums are secular chapels of a script of respectability. Hats come off if they obstruct a neighbor's sky. Gloves may remain if they behave. Cassell's guide prefers quiet shoes, and so does everyone else. You treat catalogue cards like citizens with rights, returning them to their drawer as if to a home address. In these hushed drawing rooms of the public kind, curiosity is welcome when it wears slippers. A whispered "Thank you" to a librarian travels farther than it sounds. Parks and promenades convert social rules into geometry. Paths imply pace. Lawns imply restraint. Benches imply democracy with cushions. Introductions prefer sunlight to shade, chaperones to chance, and dogs that mind their lead. Respectability politics adores visible serenity. Reading, strolling, a sketch that looks like air and not ambition. If the bandstand starts a waltz, your foot taps on 2 and your thoughts on none. Ritualized routine is leisure with manners. Public blunders teach quickly and, if you're clever, quietly. A skirt hem rips. You claim a lamppost, pin with battlefield efficiency, and move on as if you meant to demonstrate resilience. Tight stays and heat make the horizon tilt. You sit, breathe, and let the world shrink to a handkerchief-sized map, till it rights itself. A parcel bursts its string. You laugh small, not smaller, and by another yard. In regimented life, recovery is the real resume. By late afternoon, the city has graded you, and whether you noticed or not, you pass by staying legible. The coal smoke air softens, shop lights warm, and the pavement begins suggesting doorways again. Places where the public script hands off to private ritual. You'll feel your steps adapt as you cross another threshold, where the calling card snap resumes its authority, and the clink of teaspoons becomes the language of welcome. The street slows at the threshold, and so do you. Because Victorian Etiquette Codes treat a door like a courtroom with prettier wallpaper. Coal smoke air clings to your shawl, while a bell pull waits like a quiz you've studied for. Daily propriety says 1 firm ring, not 2. You're confident, not starving. A footman's face becomes your weather report. Sunny welcome, light drizzle, or not at home. Respectability politics hides inside that phrase. It can mean migraine, ministry, or please try never. You hand the rectangle of your name with a calm wrist, and hear the calling card snap land like punctuation. Card trays are ledgers that smile. You read them the way bankers read balance sheets. Upper left corner fold admits, I called. Upper right congratulates. Envelope whispers, privacy, you haven't earned. Oakley's manual loves this grammar because it keeps feelings on paper where they behave. Cassell's guide reminds you not to doodle monograms that look like ambition. In rule-bound living, paper quality is character in drag, so choose stock that holds ink and nerve. Your card says you exist. The tray decides if you recur. At-home days are social weather forecasts printed in tiny type. Hosts declare Tuesdays or Thursdays. You don't fight the calendar, you surf it. Arrive between 2 and 5. Never hungry and never empty-handed. Head manuals prefer flowers with stems shorter than your stories. Fossily prescribed behavior times the visit to 15 minutes unless the room begs you to stay. Regimented life loves a guest who knows when warmth becomes weight. The hallway's the prologue. And yes, even the umbrella has lines to read. Wet wraps never greet silk. That truce keeps hushed drawing rooms from smelling like the river. Gloves off only if the hostess's hands appear. Kid leather scent can remain the chaperone of touch. Tight stays remind you to sit like your spine signed a treaty with gravity. Gaslight halos soften edges and sharpen judgment, annoyingly at once. The servant vanishes as if swallowed by the script of respectability. Your cue begins. Introductions are bridges. You don't build yourself. Let the hostess lay the planks. Name travels nameward. Mrs. Ellery, may I present? And conversation becomes legal tender. Gendered manners offer 5 safe subjects. Weather, books, music, exhibitions, the room itself. Conduct literature warns against the 6th. Anyone's private life, as if it bites. Daily propriety adores questions that can be answered without new furniture. If humor arrives, keep it housebroken. The carpet remembers. Seating is chess played with cushions. Choose the chair that lets conversation find you without needing to hunt. Too near the fire reads needy. Too near the door reads restless. Middle distance says company. Mrs. Beaton's advice prefers ankles that behave and elbows that don't audition for leadership. Rest a glove on your lap, like a comma ready to pause a sentence. In a rule-book existence, your posture is a proposal the room can accept. Tea arises as diplomacy poured thin. The clink of teaspoons sets tempo. You stir without drumming and sip without commentary. Sugar tongs are tiny referees. No fishing, no splashing, no heroics. Cassell's guide whispers milk after tea, unless the house is Irish and smiling. Biscuits are designed to leave no evidence. Crumbs tell stories and stories travel. Decorum and discipline is mostly gravity practiced politely. Conversation breathes best when nobody wrestles it. Offer light anecdotes with clean endings, not sagas that need rescue. Respectability politics forgives ignorance faster than certainty wielded like a poker. Period magazines in the corner can lend you a topic on short notice. Routledge's manual approves of complimenting taste over cost, memory over pedigree. If a silence lands, let the porcelain speak for 3 seconds. Then you may. Not at home doesn't always mean not inside. It often means not available to the algorithm. Leave a card anyway. Trays are memory palaces where absence counts politely. If the door opens only a crack, you shine in small formats. So glad to find you well. In this ritualized routine, brevity is kindness dressed as efficiency. Conduct literature favors exits that don't need editing later. You step back into coal smoke air with a reputation half an inch taller. Breach management is its own art, and you'll use it more than once. Arrive on the wrong day, and your note apologizes before the kettle boils. Overstay by 5 minutes, and you gift a compliment that lets the hostess own the finale. Spill a drop, and you block quickly, then change the subject to the flower's Latin name. Respectability politics grade reduces accidents if recovery is elegant. Cassell's guide never says panic, which is convenient, because neither should you. Pond's visits into relationships. Your desk is where goodwill compounds. Thank you notes. Leave the house within 24 hours. Legible like decisions. Mrs. Beaton's advice blesses specifics. The lemon sponge. over abstractions. The refreshments. Routledge's manual demands dates, because memory cheats more than malice. In rule-bound living, paper is the bloodstream. Keep it warm and moving. You file copies because even kindness likes a carbon. When you host, the roles swap without changing the score. All tidy, lamps steady, card tray cleared like a stage between acts. Daily propriety asks you to seat talkers where they want form a thunderclap. Tea service placed so traffic flows and elbows don't mutiny. Etiquette manuals want your smile to be a doorman, not a floodgate. If the room hums like a hive and nobody stings, you did it right. Evening cools, and the door learns your timing. You've translated social rules into muscle memory that doesn't squeak. The calling card snap in your pocket feels less like nerves and more like rhythm. Gaslight halos follow you to the street as if to check their work. Conduct culture has weighed your minutes and grudgingly approved. From here the table grows longer, the knives get talkative, and conversations learn the choreography of courses. The moment you step from the hall into the dining room, you feel the script of respectability tighten like a well-laced corset. Gaslight halos turn silver into small moons, and the rustle of silk becomes percussion for the evening's score. Under Victorian Etiquette Codes, the table is a stage, and place cards are the casting list. You sit where the host's plan says you'll be witty, but not dangerous. Daily propriety expects you to notice the centerpiece, not admire yourself in the spoons. Respectability politics has already arranged the room, so rank and conversation won't collide head-on. Breathe, smile, and remember, you're here to look effortless in a rule-book existence. Before anyone lifts a fork, the furniture has spoken. Chairs are spaced for whispers, not declarations, and the distance between you and the nearest elder is a social rule disguised as inches. Castle's guide quietly insists you help the neighbor to your right before thinking about your own plate, because conduct culture adores generosity that looks automatic. A footman ghosts behind your shoulder with the confidence of someone who read the seating plan twice. The kid leather scent of your gloves fades as you settle, a reminder to keep hands polite and visible. If the coal smoke air tries to sneak in at the windows, the fire beats it back with a respectable crackle. The cover, the initial arrangement of plates and cutlery, reads like a prologue in silver. Knives and forks march outward to in, each shape a hint you're expected to decode, without looking panicked. Routledge manual says the fish knife is a leaf for lifting, not a machete for hunting, and the broad blade isn't for buttering your autobiography across the bread. Fussy, yes, but fussily prescribed behavior keeps elbows from writing scandal on the tablecloth. You'll learn to set cutlery down at gentle angles that say, still enjoying, not sound the trumpet. In regimented life, angles have grammar. Soup is mercy served warm, and conversation follows its steam. Conduct literature, the first course is for weather, music, and the agreeable bits of period magazines, never for income or injuries. You tilt the bowl away from you, sip without slurping, and let your spoon travel in calm arcs, because decorum discipline hates splashy metaphors and literal splashes equally. If someone asks a thorny question, you answer with understatement and a strategic swallow. The clink of teaspoons from the sideboard is a friendly metronome reminding you not to talk faster than the room breathes. You've already survived harder tests, like choosing a bonnet under fluorescent judgment. Fish arrives with bones and expectations. The delicate leaf-shaped knife slides under the fillet. You lift, fold, and park the hazards on the rim, as if you rehearsed in a mirror. Castle's guide says if a bone reaches your mouth, you escort it to the fork with dignity, not to the napkin with panic. It's a small magic trick that tells the table you can navigate danger without choreography showing. Gendered manners ask you to offer sauce first to your neighbor, and anecdotes second to the table at large. You're becoming fluent in this rule-bound living without letting it rewrite your personality. By the roast, the room loosens a notch, but not the belts. Tight stays will see to that. Carving is theater delegated to the host or a trusted lieutenant. Your job is to look confident about potatoes. Mrs. Beaton's advice would approve of measured bites and stories with clean endings that don't require paramedics or a map. unwinding, submissive Gartenswand, Hatzensbedient. Respectability politics rolls its eyes at speed. It prefers visible enjoyment that finishes exactly when the next course appears. If peas try to escape, you discourage them gently, because chasing them advertises impatience. You're playing chamber music, not drums. Bread and butter are diplomacy, not DIY carpentry. Tear a small piece, butter that piece only, and never treat the roll like it owes you money. Conduct culture reads heavy hands as heavy minds, which is unfair but historically accurate. The best compliment to the kitchen is an empty plate and zero drama, not a speech about spices. If you're tempted to reach, don't. You ask, and a footman or neighbor bridges the distance so the table's geometry remains intact. In this ritualized routine, restraint makes everything easier for everyone. Wine is conversation with a stem. You let the host set the tempo, accept a taste, and keep your glass traveling at the speed of your judgment. Period magazines may hint at pairings, but the safest line is always, "How admirable the claret," followed by a pivot to paintings or last week's lecture. Gendered manners tolerate a decline with a smile and no explanation. Explanations invite debate, and debate invites spillage. The point isn't to drink, it's to stay legible. A little water keeps the narrative crisp. Between courses, the table breathes, and so does the story. You speak across, not down the line, turning to your right for one course and to your left for the next, because etiquette manuals choreograph fairness into the seating plan. Humor should fit inside a teacup. If it needs a stage, save it. Rutledge's manual reminds you that the best listener often leaves the strongest impression, which is both manipulative and true. If someone missteps, too loud, too long, you offer a soft change of topic as a favor, not a verdict. It's social judo with napkins. Sweets are a test with sugar around the edges. Tarts dare you to crumble. Puddings try to tremble into your lap. Fruit demands cutlery that feels ceremonial. Mrs. Beaton's advice is blunt. What cannot be eaten neatly should be admired briefly. You choose the dessert that travels politely from plate to memory, then compliment the cook through the hostess, because respectability politics roots praise up the hierarchy. No one ever regretted leaving the table cleaner than they found it. The clink of teaspoons returns like a lullaby for nerves. Coffee or tea signals the soft landing, and the room adjusts its pitch. Cups replace knives. Conversation rises and thins. The orchestra moves from brass to strings. Castle's guide likes gratitude delivered in specifics, the hair, the citrus, rather than adjectives that have to carry all the weight. If cigars and billiards are on the program, the genders will temporarily part, each room continuing the same performance at different volumes. You thank with your eyes, before you thank with your mouth. Hushed drawing rooms love a guest who exits sentences as neatly as chairs. When you stand, your chair makes the only sound it's allowed to make, and the evening folds itself without creases. The calling card snap in your pocket reminds you to write in the morning. Thanks to the hostess, a note to the host, and perhaps a line to the new acquaintance who made the roast seem shorter. In a regimented life, follow-through is how good impressions earn interest. As the gaslight halos dim in the corridor, you feel the decorum discipline relax its grip by a finger's width. Somewhere, a piano is waiting, and the parlor will turn conversation into music and permission into steps, without anyone saying the word dance. When the dining room exhales you into the parlor, the atmosphere changes pitch from brass to strings. Gaslight halos soften the edges of faces, the rustle of silk becomes a hush rather than an announcement, and the clink of teaspoons returns as a calmer heartbeat. You're back on the carpet where Victorian etiquette codes are gentler to the eye and stricter to the ear. Daily propriety tells you to read the room the way you'd read a preface. Who's near the piano? Who's guarding the card table? Who's pretending not to be near the door? In a rulebook existence, attention is currency, and the hostess controls the mint. Music is the safest bridge between strangers, so the host or hostess offers it first. Gendered manners keep you from sprinting to the keyboard, even if your fingers are itching. You wait to be asked, then demur once before you agree, because conduct culture likes modest talent and hates naked ambition. When you sit, your back belongs to tight stays, your timing to decorum discipline, and your taste to period magazines that have taught you which pieces flatter a room. Play short, play clean, and leave silence behind you like a bow. Respectability politics calls that restraint. You'll call it strategy. If you don't play, you turn pages or carry the applause, both of which matter more than they sound. In hushed drawing rooms, a crisp page turn makes you look competent and considerate without speaking at all. Cassell's guide even recommends where to stand, so you're useful without blocking admiration, a small art that wins disproportionate goodwill. The script of respectability hides in these micro-movements, the fussily prescribed behavior that keeps the machine quiet. A single misjudged bustle swing can upend a music stool. You learn to give furniture a wide berth and people a wider one. Parlor games appear when the room needs oxygen. Carrés, word games, forfeits. Little theatres where rule-bound living pretends to forget the rules while following a fresh set. Routledge's manual praises the kind of cleverness that lets others shine, which is both saintly and effective. Choose roles that fit your voice, not your ego. A well-timed wrong answer can be as generous as a correct one. Respectability politics treats a game like a weather vane. It points toward who can laugh without scratching. You aim for breeze, not gust. Cards are a different province with their own magistrates. Whist or Vingt-et-un can be entirely proper if the vicar isn't in the room or is the one shuffling, and you learn quickly to ask the house preference rather than citing a textbook. Coins don't belong on this table. Points and pride travel instead, and even those should walk, not run. Conduct literature warns that triumph is louder when it's silent, and it's right. You win by remembering partners, not hands. If stakes rise, you congratulate more than you count. The rulebook existence dislikes arithmetic on faces. Conversation takes the middle of the room and expects you to steer as if with a teacup for a wheel. You offer topics with clean edges, an exhibition from the period magazines, a line from Mrs. Beeton's advice turned into humour, a rumour strictly about weather, and you wait for consent in someone's eyes before you proceed. Daily propriety forbids cornering a guest with an opinion that needs scaffolding and permits delight in a story that lands by itself. If the subject heats, you do what good cooks do with soup. Lower the flame, add bread, and keep it from boiling over. Seating is more than comfort. It's a map of permissible distances. You choose a chair that lets you see the door, hear the piano, and rescue a shy person without announcing the rescue. Gendered manners dislike the sofa for two unless three can plausibly fit. The host knows this and has placed an ottoman nearby like a moral. Respectability politics reads inches like headlines, so you keep your inches friendly and fluent. In a regimented life, the safest intimacy is a shared laugh that leaves no ash. Chaperones draw invisible lines that feel kinder than they look. An aunt's embroidery hoop can be the license that allows a longer conversation, because etiquette manuals trust seniority to hold the leash. You practice saying things that sound ordinary and mean precisely as much as the other person is ready to hear. Conduct culture loves the sentence that offers a door and never pushes anyone through it. When you leave a chair, you leave it warm, not marked. Refreshments return in miniature to keep hands civilized. A sponge finger is an ally, not a meal. Chocolate is a trap for cuffs. Oranges are enemies unless thoughtfully quartered. Mrs. Beeton's advice treats a sideboard as a timetable, small plates, smaller bites, and nothing that can explode on fabric. The clink of teaspoons patrols the tempo, giving you pauses to shift groups without being obvious. In the script of respectability, sugar is diplomacy, and napkins are peace treaties. Mistakes will audition, no matter how well you cast the evening. A dropped fan, a misheard name. A singer who chooses a piece 20 measures beyond her reach. Each one is an opportunity to demonstrate the kind of kindness that gets you remembered. Cassell's guide suggests you praise what is salvageable and redirect what isn't. A tidy trick that saves face and evening at once. Respectability politics forgives skill gaps more readily than social ones. Smile as if the blunder has already been mended, and half the time it will be. When the clock leans toward carriage hour, the room shifts to shorter sentences and longer goodbyes. You stand only when standing becomes a favor, never a verdict, and you let thanks pass through the hostess as through a keyhole that fits praise, but not speeches. The calling card snap waits in your pocket to remind you that paper will finish what words began. A note tomorrow will convert admiration into memory. In a rule-bound living, follow-up is how warmth earns interest. As you step into the hall, coal smoke air brushes the edges of your sleeves, and the gaslight halos find the brass again, sharper now than when you arrive. You can feel how conduct literature has seeped into your muscles, how a door handle can teach patience and a teacup can teach mercy. Outside, the pavement writes a new script. Invitations to the long rooms with longer echoes where permission turns to steps. The music keeps count, and the etiquette codes wear dance shoes. Step into the assembly rooms and the air changes character. Gaslight halos bloom, coal smoke air stays politely at the cloakroom, and the floor gleams like a rule-book existence you can actually glide across. Victorian etiquette codes are sharper here because music forgives nothing. Daily propriety sets your posture, tight stays will enforce it, and conduct culture sets your pace, never sprint, never stall. The rustle of silk turns into a metronome, and every glance has a decimal point. If the parlor was conversation with cups, this is conversation with feet. Your evening begins on paper. The dance card is a ledger of intentions. Waltz, quadrille, polka, each line a promise that decorum discipline expects you to keep. Routledge's manual says accept with a smile, decline with a reason, and never erase. Cassell's guide adds that a blot is gossip in ink. Respectability politics watches how quickly the first sets fill, and who you reserve for the middle, the quiet proof of preference. Gendered manners make the pencil feel heavier than it looks. You're accounting for reputation in half measures and ribbons. Introductions remain the legal tender of contact. A hostess carries names like porcelain. Without her, even the bravest bow is just wind. Conduct literature insists on the full formula. May I present? Before any request to stand up together becomes valid. A chaperone's nod is the license. Her raised eyebrow is the speed limit. In regimented life, permission is choreography. You can feel the script of respectability in your fingertips before you've taken a step. The waltz is the scandal that learned Latin. Period magazines once gasped at its proximity. Etiquette manuals domesticated it with arm positions, measured like geometry. You hold, you turn, you breathe where the bar line tells you. Close enough for grace, far enough for daylight. Cassell's guide suggests talking in commas, not paragraphs, and never louder than strings. If you count, do it in your head. If you're dizzy, smile at the far wall until it forgives you. Rule-bound living looks effortless when the math stays invisible. Not every set is a waltz, which is how beginners survive and veterans show range. Quadrilles flatter teamwork, polkas reward bounce without bravado, and a gallop demands restraint from anyone born competitive. Gendered manners ask you to match your partner's energy rather than audition for an audience. Mrs. Beaton's advice would quietly approve of feet that speak small truths and never shout. The room can smell ambition the way it smells a singed wick. Keep heat for the music, not the gossip. Declining is its own language. Respectability politics hates blunt refusals, so you borrow phrases that close a door without slamming it. Engaged for this one, promised for the next. Conduct culture adds a corollary. If you refuse a gentleman, you don't accept another in the same set unless you've traded reasons in advance. The bench is not a punishment, it's a vantage point. In a ritualized routine, dignity sits straighter than disappointment. Gloves are treaties with seams. Kid leather scent keeps touch in the realm of etiquette rather than biography, and the house rules dictate when a lady may remove a glove, refreshments, and when a gentleman must not, the floor. Routledge's manual would call a glove a boundary with manners. You discover that the whisper of fabric is part of the music. It says enough more clearly than words could. Even handshakes read differently in hushed drawing rooms after midnight. Small talk on the move has house limits. Conduct literature permits compliments about timing, never about figure. Observations about the orchestra, not about other couples. Footnotes. The safest joke is the one that makes your partner look quick without making anyone else look slow. Daily propriety wants exits that fit between cadences, so you end sentences where the violins lift. If silence arrives, let the rhythm fill it. The clink of teaspoons returns later, not here. Accidents will test the code. A stepped hem, a loosened pin, a strap that remembers gravity. These are not disasters, but drills. You escort a partner to a safe edge, signal a chaperone, and repair quietly with the toolkit hidden in a reticule. Pins, salts, thread the color of mercy. Cassell's guide never writes panic, and neither do you. In rule-bound living, recovery is a more reliable advertisement than perfection. The supper room is the armistice. Plates must be manageable. Sauces are risky. Oranges are treason unless quartered by a saint. Gendered manners travel in pairs. No one vanishes unescorted, and everyone returns to the chaperone before the next penciled promise. Period magazines endorse lemonade and modest laughter. Respectability politics counts minutes here too. Linger kindly, not long. A good host makes it easy to leave before rumors arrive. By the last set, the arithmetic is visible to anyone who can add, who offered the final waltz, who asked for a future morning call, who will be reading etiquette manuals with new interest tomorrow. Your card might be lighter, your name a shade heavier in the right ears. Conduct culture respects endings that land exactly on the bar line. No scenes, no sprints, just bows that feel like sentences with periods. The calling card snap in your pocket reminds you, the floor isn't the only place reputations travel. When the door opens to the night, coal smoke air cools the room's glow, and the carriage step becomes your last test of balance. You've spent hours inside regimented life without losing yourself, and that's the quiet victory. Paper will finish what music began. Notes of thanks, a line to the hostess, and, if the pencils told the truth, one envelope that changes the temperature of tomorrow's parlor. You wait to a quieter kind of pressure, coal smoke air thinning at the window, the clink of teaspoons mapping your pulse, and the card tray waiting like homework you assigned yourself. Victorian Etiquette Codes don't sleep late. Daily propriety starts counting minutes the moment your feet find the rug. Rule-bound living says you don't think about whether to make calls, you decide where, in what order, and with which tone. Conduct culture measures steadiness in inches and ink. You smile at the mirror because respectability politics reads faces before it reads names. The tray is a topographical map of yesterday's promises. Cards from last night's assembly rooms sit beside neighbors' rectangles and two envelopes that smell faintly of violets. Corner folds speak. Upper left means I called. Upper right is congratulations. A penciled PPC signals travel. You sketch a route that obeys social rules and geography. At home day here, condolence there, felicitations last so no one mistakes your face for sorrow. Cassell's guide would applaud the order. Routledge's manual would applaud the punctuality. Either way, the calling card snap sets your marching tempo. Before the cloak, the writing desk. Thick paper, steady ink, and sentences that can be safely repeated by a butler without catching fire. Etiquette manuals agree on three notes you'll need most. Thank you, specific, never syrupy, apology, brief, not autobiographical, and arrangement clear, dated, and chaperone-friendly. Conduct literature begs you to address, sand, and seal before you're too busy, because lateness is a louder accent than any you brought from childhood. You add a line that remembers the lemon sponge. Period magazines always advise details over adjectives. You don't move a household alone, you conduct it. The maid learns which bouquets go to which mantle. The boy knows which letters require a uniform delivery. and the cook gets warning if condolence might turn into tea. Mrs. Beeton's advice hums behind every instruction. Kindness in public, clarity in private, and no sarcasm anywhere. Respectability politics listens for the temperature of your voice, so you keep it warm even when the schedule is cold. The house adopts your rhythm and forgives your speed. Outside, the city has its own etiquette metronome. You walk with purpose, not hurry, letting gaslight halos fade into day, while the kid leather scent of gloves keeps the street off your skin. Gendered manners arrange the pavement. Men take the gutter side. Women refuse puddles unless heroism pays rent. At the first door you ring once, never twice, because fussily prescribed behavior hates the sound of appetite. Rulebook existence turns doorsteps into tiny stages. You arrive already in character. Short calls are small theatres of tact. 15 minutes in hushed drawing rooms is long enough for a compliment, a clean joke, and a topic that doesn't require a subpoena. Tea may appear. You accept if poured, decline if the clock is a tyrant. The rustle of silk says you're listening. The tilt of a cup says you're about to leave. Decorum discipline keeps you from auditioning new opinions on old friends. When conversation lurches toward the private, you lower the flame like a careful cook. Everyone breathes easier, including the curtains. Not at home does not mean unkind. It means the algorithm is asleep. You leave one's card anyway, because tray's a memory with manners. An envelope can whisper intimacy you haven't earned. Better to write later on black-edged paper, if grief, or brighter stock, if joy. Routledge's manual says never ask the door to explain. Doors don't. If you've mistaken an at-home day, recovery's paper the same afternoon. Rule-bound living forgives quickly when repair is elegant. Back home you balance a ledger that's part money, part mercy. Who called first? Who called twice? Who called during rain? Respectability politics counts effort when sums are close, so you record weather, minutes, and small favors. Period magazines in the rack suggest which upcoming bazaars require your face, which lectures can stand your absence, and which charity lists will be printed where everyone sees them. Conduct culture is a long game played with small pieces. You keep every pawn tidy. Post brings invitations and dilemmas. A dinner on Thursday collides with an at-home day. A musical begs for a song you can barely play. A committee wants cakes and your spine. You accept with specifics and decline with a sentence that doesn't invite cross-examination. Mrs. Beeton's advice likes the phrase, previous engagement. Cassell's guide prefers regret exceedingly. And both agree that over-explaining is a kind of rudeness. Daily propriety means your calendar never looks surprised. Reputation breathes in the way you handle rumor. Someone hints that a gentleman lingered too long by the palms. Someone else wonders aloud about a cousin's sudden cheer. You feed gossip nothing. Admire the writing of the paper that carried the tale. Compliment the florist who arranged the palms. And let silence do the arithmetic. Respectability politics loses power when the room refuses to audition for judge and jury. Conduct literature smiles on humor that leaves no bruises. Small tactics earn large interest. A second card at a chilly reception resets the ledger without asking for warmth. A flower sent the morning after a crowded at-home day recalls your face without taking space. Penciled to inquire for health on the back of a card gets remembered by servants who decide whether your next ring sounds friendly. Etiquette manuals never print these tricks loudly. Period magazines hint between advertisements. You collect them the way careful people collect pins. Dusk folds the city into amber again, and gaslight halos make stare brass look like medals you didn't mean to win. The house exhales as boots return to their corner, and the card tray stops acquiring opinions for the day. You stack tomorrow's paper, smooth tomorrow's ribbon, and let daily propriety relax its grip by one finger. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tests its voice, and you know that the week's theatre will soon move from parlours to pews and promenades, where the same Victorian etiquette codes try to look holy and wholesome at the same time. Sunday begins before the bells, with you checking hems for ash and mine for calm. Daily propriety lowers your palette a shade. Bright ribbons read like noise in the nave. Victorian Etiquette Codes follow you down the steps as faithfully as the prayer book. Coal smoke air gives way to cool stone, and gaslight halos surrender to windowed daylight that forgives less than candles do. The script of respectability is gentler here, but it still edits your posture. Tight stays preach discipline even when no one is in the pulpit. A pew is not just a seat. It's a title deed with theology attached. Families rent or inherit places, and social rules expect you to honor the map even when it offends your ankles. Castle's guide whispers to arrive on the bell's second breath, neither eager nor dramatic. You slide inward for elders and widows without counting rank, because conduct culture wants mercy to outrank math once a week. Respectability politics notices who yields and who pretends not to see. Your reward is silence that doesn't feel like exile. Clothes speak softly when the organ starts. Half-mourning violets, quiet bonnets, gloves that keep kid leather scent and fingerprints to yourself. Decorum discipline prefers sincerity to spectacle. Period magazines urge modest trims that don't compete with hymns. Fussily prescribed behavior even governs veils. Down for prayer, lifted for singing so the mouth can be read as well as heard. The rulebook existence can be kind when it keeps people from stepping on each other's feelings. Prayer is choreography for breath. You kneel without rustle, stand without rattling the book rack, and sit as if the pew taught you how. Etiquette manuals advise the prayer book at ribs height, eyes mostly down, mind mostly steady. A child fidgets 2 rows ahead. Your smile is a benediction that doesn't ripple past the family. Day propriety asks you to behave as if God can hear the clink of teaspoons from your conscience. That image alone keeps your elbows honest. The offertory is charity's quiet exam. Coins travel in envelopes so they don't gossip. Larger gifts go by hand later, because humility photographs better in memory than in motion. Mrs. Beaton's advice would approve of a left glove slipped off with minimum drama, and replaced before the plate leaves your reach. Respectability politics remembers steadiness more than sums. It's the rhythm, not the crescendo, that the parish notes. The rule-bound living can still feel warm when generosity walks softly. Eyes tithe too. In hushed drawing rooms of stone, you acknowledge acquaintances with a degree of eyelash, not a parade. Introductions wait for the porch. Routledge's manual prefers God and grammar to meet separately. You loan a hymn book edge to a stranger, but not your name, which belongs to daylight after dismissal. Gendered manners keep men on the aisle, ladies inward. Children between as insurance against boredom. The choreography keeps restless feet from writing editorials on the floorboards. Dismissal turns the porch into a civil marketplace. Conduct. Introductions like bridge building, name to name, house to house. The vicar's wife is a switchboard of permissions, connecting long-promised morning calls without raising her voice. Period magazines will later pretend none of this mattered. Everyone present knows better. Your card case waits like a pocket conscience, ready to become Monday's route. A calling card snap is almost audible under the sparrows. Then comes the promenade, Sabbath second service. Paths in the park carry different speeds for different lives, and social rules choreograph them so no one collides. Parasols draw gentle borders, dogs provide excuses for approach. Benches imply democracy with cushions. Respectability politics adores being seen without being accused of seeking it. You walk like the weather is your alibi, and company your curriculum. The coal smoke air from distant streets hangs back, as if London agreed to be polite for an hour. Conversation outdoors is lighter than the prayer book, and heavier than gossip. You admire flowers, not fortunes. You ask after health, not history. You praise the sermon's verbs even if the nouns escaped you. Conduct literature favors compliments that can survive being repeated to absent ears. A chaperone's embroidery hoop or folded shawl serves as quiet license for an extra lap. Gendered manners stretch just enough to feel like liberty and snap back before rumor earns overtime. Gossip will test the railings. Someone wonders aloud about a prolonged waltz from last night, Someone else speculates about a ring that might be coming. Safest tactic is admiration of prose. The paper's writing was surprisingly elegant. Respectability politics loses heat when you refuse to feed it anecdotes. The rule-book existence is easier to live with when you let rumor die of a thin diet. Silence can be kinder than defense. By late afternoon, Sunday folds itself like a well-behaved shawl. You return to hushed drawing rooms where the clink of teaspoons resumes patrol and period magazines become safer company than opinions. The etiquette manuals on the side table look less like scolds and more like seatbelts. In the quiet you feel how this ritualized routine keeps tempers cool and invitations warm for the week to come. Tomorrow the same faces will meet over ledgers and lists, where piety shakes hands with logistics. And there, behind the brass of good intentions, waits another theatre entirely. Subscription sheets, soup tickets, and committee tables, where conduct culture learns to count. Respectability politics keeps score, and a sharpened pencil can move more coal than a sermon. You enter a parish room that smells faintly of coal smoke air and ink, where gaslight halos turn dust into confetti, and the clink of teaspoons keeps time. Victorian Etiquette Codes arrive before the vicar does. Chairs in a respectful oval, names on slips, and a ledger that looks suspiciously like scripture. Daily propriety expects your smile to be warm and your sentences to be short, because conduct culture prefers action dressed as modesty. The secretary's pencil taps like a small gavel, reminding everyone that regimented life loves minutes more than speeches. In this rulebook existence, good intentions don't count until they're legible. Subscriptions are the bloodstream, and the list is both diary and scoreboard. Names sit beside sums, with a column for promises that sound like money, but aren't quite money yet. Respectability politics swears. This is charity. You can feel the social rules ranking the room as each line fills. Etiquette manuals never say it outright, but the script of respectability uses numbers to decide who gets hurt first. You learn to read ink, the way you read faces. What's steady? What's late? What's generous after applause? The ledger smiles politely and remembers forever. Attendance is choreographed on paper before anyone takes a chair. Card trays across the parish carried invitations 2 days ago, with corner folds that told matrons who must advise and juniors who must assist. The calling card snap you practiced at doors turns into sign-in slips stacked like polite dominoes. Routledge's manual would approve of the punctuality. Cassell's guide would applaud the seating plan that keeps thunderclaps apart. Daily propriety asks you to be present, prepared, and perfectly unsurprised. Rule-bound living hates improvisation almost as much as it hates stains. Seating is a quiet constitution. The vicar's wife presides, 2 elder matrons flank like commas, and younger ladies anchor the ends where ideas can float without capsizing the meeting. Gendered manners ensure any gentleman patron present speaks once, and then kindly yields the floor, which is conduct literature's way of saying he was outmaneuvered. You place your notebook where it can catch decisions before they fly. Decorum discipline is visible in the distance between chairs. Near enough for consensus, far enough to keep tempers from shaking hands. Hushed drawing rooms have nothing on a good committee. The agenda is practical theatre. Soup funds, coal tickets, blankets, a school roof that insists on being leakier in stories than on paper. Mrs. Beaton's advice hums through portion sizes while the treasurer performs arithmetic dressed as kindness. You vote to send fuel before frost writes its name on children's windows. You schedule sewing before sleeves become headlines. Puncture reminds you that time is a currency, and chilblains don't wait for elegant phrasing. In a regimented life, logistics are love with a ledger. Money handling is etiquette in arithmetic. Coins travel in envelopes, so they don't gossip. Larger sums are pledged aloud in tones that pretend not to notice themselves. Period magazines praise anonymity and then print subscription lists because the parish reads. Respectability politics wants virtue to be both modest and verifiable. You suggest a matching scheme and phrase it as a question. Since fussily prescribed behavior likes generosity best, when it sounds like someone else's idea. The secretary writes faster when the room has a rhythm. Paper turns civility into consequence. Minutes are a novel edited by a diplomat. The secretary, calm pen, ruthless accuracy, translates stumbles into spirited debate and near collisions into varied views. Routledge's manual would underline her verbs and circle her restraint. You learn to frame stories so 5 shillings move from cake to coal without anyone feeling scolded. Clink of teaspoons gives you the breaths to do it. Pour, pause, propose. In the script of respectability, rhetoric is a tool for kindness, not a spotlight. Boundaries hide inside benevolence. Who is the deserving poor gets decided in language that never says no while saying it. Chaperone visits are scheduled to inspect cases with dignity and tact. 2 ladies after dusk, 3 if the address raises concern. Gendered manners protect the inspected as much as the inspector when they're practiced correctly. Conduct literature insists on notes written the same day, with names spelled right and judgment spelled softly. Daily propriety is mercy with receipts. Optics matter, because the work is public even when it's quiet. You plan a charity bazaar that looks modest and behaves ambitious. Stalls where needlework slows feet. A prize hamper that reads generous, not gaudy. Prices stated as for the roof rather than for 6pence. Cassell's guide whispers about bunting widths, while Mrs. Beaton's advice chooses cakes that travel politely from plate to reputation. Respectability politics wants cheer without triumph, and you become very good at that face. Ritualized routine can raise a roof beam by beam. Crisis arrives in small shoes, a misprinted list, an over-ordered cake, a rumor that a shilling went astray. Recovery is choreography. You rehearse with letters. You write 3 notes: apology, correction, reassurance, each dated, specific, and brief enough to be read in a doorway. The committee breathes easier, and the parish returns to errands. Clerk culture forgives the flaw faster than it forgives the messy fix. In a rule-bound living, neatness is half the virtue. The work has a cost no ledger tallies. Your spine learns the weight of minutes. Your gloves remember ink, as well as kid leather scent. Your voice becomes the temperature of the room on purpose. Etiquette manuals would call it daily propriety. You recognize decorum, discipline disguised as stamina. When tempers spike, tea arrives, and the clink of teaspoons does exactly what it's always done. Reset the pulse without needing speeches. Respectability politics notices who can lower flames without scolding. That person gets asked back. By late afternoon, the signatures dry, envelopes seal, and the gaslight halos find the shine on the table again. You've moved coal with pencils and kept faces intact with phrasing. The ledger is heavier by pounds and lighter by worry. Outside, the whole weights that will turn this planning is stalls, ribbons, and the peculiar commerce where favors wear muslin and prices hide in stories. The paper engine you've built is about to meet a crowd that pays in coins, glances, and promises that smell faintly of cinnamon. You arrive to a hall strung with bunting and the faint perfume of paste, cinnamon, and fresh ink, and you can feel Victorian Etiquette Codes humming beneath the ribbons. Gaslight halos make muslin look like morning, even if coal smoke air followed everyone through the door. Daily propriety expects you to smile as if you weren't calculating change and reputations at the same time. The layout is strategy in plain sight. Needlework near the entrance to slow feet. Sweets at the corner to catch families. Books where clergy must pass twice. Conduct culture rewards. Order you can brag about. Respectability politics has opinions about everything, from bunting width to how loudly your till should think. Your stall is a sentence in the larger paragraph of good works, and you're responsible for punctuation. Prices are pinned in a hand that looks confident but not hungry. You never bark numbers, you tell stories. For the roof, for coals, for the children's shoes. Because social rules make generosity easier when it has a face. Gendered manners prefer you persuasive without push, cheerful without sparkle that looks like pride. Routledge's manual would approve of your calm receipts. Cassell's guide would nod at prices that invite rather than corner. In rule-bound living, even arithmetic wears gloves. You sell outcomes, not objects. Traffic flows the way you planned it on paper, then surprises you at speed. Shoppers arrive in pairs, then trios, then tides, and a single mislaid parcel can trip the whole choreography. Mrs. Beeton's advice whispers, mise en place, as if she'd always meant bazaar tables too. String, pins, paper, and a pencil with a will of its own. The calling cards snap in your pocket. Time's the first hour. You log names who promise to send a bolt of muslin or a crate of oranges. Respectability, politics keeps score invisibly while pretending not to. You remember to greet servants with the same tone you reserve for patrons. Word travels faster from kitchens than from pews. Introductions are quiet engines that drive sales without looking like it. The vicar's wife becomes a bridge, presenting a matron to your lace, a bachelor to your bookstand, a shy donor to the safe thrill of a raffle ticket. Salon graces apply even under bunting. Mrs. Ellery embroidered these by lamplight, you say, and suddenly a napkin ring acquires a halo. Period magazines will later praise community spirit, but you know it's choreography. Names stitched to objects so money feels like gratitude, not transaction. Conduct literature never said it, but generosity is easier when pride can see itself reflected in polished glass. Your job is to keep the mirror clean and the smile honest. Raffles are theatre with paper props, and decorum discipline directs them like clockwork. Tickets are numbered by a hand that doesn't smudge. The drum turns at a pace that signals fairness. The prize is desirable without winking at extravagance. A child draws the number, the hall breathes together, and the winner, if a matron, donates the hamper back, because respectability politics loves the story of magnanimity in public. You applaud just loudly enough and already have a second act ready. Smaller prizes that spread cheer like confetti nobody has to sweep. Gendered manners let delight sparkle, so long as money never looks like noise. The optics are half the philanthropy, the other half is bookkeeping. Your tools are simple and ruthless: string, paper, a ledger, and your memory for faces. You write names as they're spoken and repeat them back. Conduct culture's trick for making people feel seen without turning the scene into theatre. Coins fall like raindrops, never hailstones, and promises land on the ledger with exact words and today's date. You tuck visiting cards into the cash box for follow-up, corner folds marking collected, or to fetch by footman. In this script of respectability, paper is the bloodstream that keeps goodwill alive past the applause. Ritualized routine turns kindness into logistics. Mishaps arrive wearing aprons and timing, and you treat each one like a dress rehearsal you prepared for. Ice card vanishes. You assign one with a smile and a nod toward the roof. A gentleman lingers too long without a purchase. A friend materializes, and suddenly the stall needs 2 pairs of hands and 1 fewer admirer. A jar of barley sugar explodes into sweetness and chaos. You sell the survivors as lucky pieces for a penny, and the children believe you. Cassell's guide never mentions sticky satin. Your damp cloth and good humour make quick work. In regimented life, recovery is how reputation tells the truth. Food stalls are diplomacy in edible form, and Mrs. Beeton's advice becomes law you can eat. You choose cakes that travel politely from plate to memory and avoid sauces that produce witnesses. The clink of teaspoons from the refreshment corner acts like a public metronome. It keeps tempers even when cues grow opinions. Gendered manners ask you to notice elders before appetites and to dispatch a plate to a volunteer who can't leave her post. Respectability politics adores a hostess who rescues without headlines. You become the kind of person whose tray knows where to go before you do. Optics are relentless, and period magazines will later print the image the hall chooses for you today. Your ribbons are modest, your smile readable, your eagerness quiet. Everything says steady rather than star. You rotate tasks, rap, write, talk, so no one feels pressed by the same voice twice. You lend your scissors and your praise, because tools and warmth both come back sharper. Victorian etiquette codes don't vanish in crowds. they soften into useful edges. When a donor wants his name whispered rather than sung, you make whispered feel grand. Midway through the ledger and the room switch leads, and you let them. A benefactor offers £1 if circumstances permit a match, and you turn to the list. 3 smaller gifts arrive like stepping stones. You announce totals without trumpets and invite the hall to cheer the outcome, not the giver. Conduct literature would call this propriety. You call it a way to keep the shy generous. Respectability politics can be a bit of a bully. Arithmetic is your chaperone. The stall hums like a hive, and no one gets stung. Closing hour approaches, and the theatre of neatness begins. Unsold goods are folded, counted, and earmarked. Some for the next bazaar, 1 or 2 as thank you gifts that money couldn't buy as gracefully. You balance the ledger while the floor still remembers the footsteps. Names with sums get checked, names with promises get dates, and you write 3 notes before your gloves are fully off. In a rule-book existence, follow-through is how virtue accrues interest. The hall exhales, bunting hangs like tired smiles. Outside, evening cools the nerves of the day, and gaslight halos find faces more honest than morning's optimism allowed. You've turned stories into coins and coins back into stories, all without stepping outside the script of respectability. The store was only the visible chapter. The invisible one waits at home. Receipts to pin, thanks to write, and a household ledger that will convert today's good intentions into coal, blankets, and a week that runs on time. The quiet power shifts back to paper and to the domestic engine that must not cough when winter raises its eyebrows. The house is quiet after the bazaar crowd, and that's when the real arithmetic begins. Gaslight halos soften the desk scratches. The clink of teaspoons keeps time while you open a ledger that smells of starch and ink. Victorian etiquette codes don't stop at doorways. They sit in these columns, deciding how warm guests will feel and how calm the kitchen will sound. Daily propriety tells you to record first, sigh later. The script of respectability prefers neat figures to noble intentions. You stack receipts like visiting cards and hear the calling cards snap in your head every time a page turns. Rule-bound living, yes, but also the only way a house breathes without wheezing. Heat is the first argument you settle, because winter never negotiates. Coal scuttle tallies turn into a month's line that can shame a bonfire, and respectability politics demands comfort without boasting. Mrs. Beaton's advice murmurs that buying early beats paying dearly. Castle's guide agrees, warning that cold guests remember longer than hot soup. You assign fireplaces like favors, drawing room always, spare bedroom only on at-home day, nursery whenever small nose is pink. Conduct culture makes warmth a civility, not a spectacle. In this regimented life, a steady hearth is better manners than any beau. Menus are diplomacy disguised as dinner decisions. You plan backward from the season and forward from the purse. Fish that forgives a late carriage, roasts that shrink without sulking, puddings that travel politely to memory. Social rules ask you to feed elders first and conversation second. Gendered manners prefer abundance that doesn't strut. Period magazines praise variety without vanity, which you translate into 3 vegetables and 1 story with a clean ending. Etiquette manuals, Routledge's manual, Cassell's guide, approve of lists that respect labor. The rulebook existence makes appetite a timetable rather than a surprise. Staff management is its own court of appeals, and you preside with paper and tone. References arrive folded like secrets. Steady means honest, clever, needs context, and quick requires a chaperone of clarity. Public praise, private correction. Decorum discipline protects dignity as efficiently as it protects carpets. You give orders as verbs that survive stairs. Lay, air, polish, fetch. Adverbs are where confusion lives. Respectability politics notices how you speak to people who can't answer back in public. Conduct literature is right. A house copies the temperature of the mistress' voice. Communication travels on rails you build every morning. Bell codes keep panic from pretending to be urgency, and short notes cross floors without losing their manners. You date instructions like you date letters because memory is a charming liar. The whole slate carries deliveries and at-home day collisions in a hand that stays legible under coal smoke air. A pinned schedule is the household's Routledge's manual. No scolding, all boundaries. This ritualized routine turns noise into choreography you can live with. Laundry is where ideals meet weather. Tight stays multiply linen. Rain multiplies trouble. Bad soap eats morale faster than it lifts stains. Period magazines swear by sun, wind, and good pegs, and you add common sense. Tablecloths are counted like coins, sleeves mended before they become headlines. You keep a mending basket by a bright window so the day can help you. Small repairs are gossip prevention. Social rules pretend not to see the work. The rustle of silk congratulates itself on being clean. You won't let the illusion forget the ledger behind it. Maintenance is economy with a halo. Lamp wicks trimmed save quarrels with shadows. Gas mantles replaced on schedule. Spare you theatrics at dusk. Boots resolved before they split, keep servants steady and corridors quieter. Cassell's guide would call it prudence. You call it keeping the house from writing its own melodrama. Fussily prescribed behavior isn't just forks and fans. It's the courage to fix small things before they draft bigger bills. In a rule-book existence, invisible heroics are often the kindest ones. Money is the ghost at every table, so you exercise it with columns. You pay tradesmen when promised. Coins folded like secrets, not brandished like proofs, and reserve credit for storms, not moods. Mrs. Beaton's advice reminds you to weigh generosity, which you translate into portions that satisfy and bins that don't weep. Respectability politics can smell unpaid jam from 2 streets away. You won't give it that pleasure. Receipts pin into the ledger like tidy alibis. The house sleeps better when the numbers do. Illness audits your systems without warning, so you stock the chest before anyone coughs. Salts, lint, linen, broth base, and the little medicines you pray not to need. Conduct culture turns compassion into lists, because panic is bad manners in a sick room. Voices drop to the level of hushed drawing rooms. Doors learn to close like apologies. Black-edged stationery stands ready for what you hope not to write. Gendered manners guard the threshold, so care doesn't become theatre. Daily propriety is simply gentleness with a clock. Hospitality needs a budget as much as a smile. You decide in ink how many dinners, how many music ales, how many bouquets the season can carry without wobbling the accounts. The logic of knives, the economy of attention, both cost something, and your ledger must agree. Period magazines make it look effortless. The household ledger makes it possible. You cut with grace rather than noise. Fewer guests, better soup, warmer room. Respectability politics applauds restraint when it can fault warmth. Paper closes what voices begin. Thank you notes leave within a day, specific as recipes. Apologies are brief and don't explain themselves into a second mistake. Arrangements wear dates like manners. You log who brought violets when coals were dear, and who sent a boy with oranges when the nursery coughed. The script of respectability runs on paper as much as on posture, and the calling card snap becomes the metronome of memory. Conduct literature wasn't being romantic. Ink is how reputation breathes between visits. When the ledgers close and the lamps are turned low, the house sounds like a well-kept promise. Gaslight halos shrink to small moons. The kid leather scent of gloves fades into the cloakroom. The clink of teaspoons gives its last, contented tap. And just as the arithmetic settles, the hall timetable lifts its eyes. Tickets to purchase, trunks to label, station clocks that keep sterner time than parlors ever do. The code that ruled your rooms is about to travel. Routledge's manual in one pocket, Cassell's guide in the other, and your own steadiness to carry the rest. A station in this era feels like a public examination, and Victorian Etiquette Codes do the grading before the clock does. Coal smoke air stiffens veils. Gaslight halos polish luggage into mirrors you didn't ask for. Announcements thud, like gongs reminding you that daily propriety does not pause for timetables. You don't brandish tickets, you present them. Flat, legible, and in the right hand, as if conduct culture personally invented paper. Trunks wear labels as neatly as visiting cards, never shrieking monograms, because respectability politics prefers confidence to display. Even your stride has grammar, brisk enough to imply competence, never so fast it suggests your life has come apart at the seams. Packing is diplomacy with hinges. A small trunk for clothes that behave, a hat box that want audition for attention, and a valise with the papers that keep rule-bound living from unraveling, letters of introduction, hotel references, and the itinerary copied in 2 hands. Mrs. Beaton's advice haunts the list, while Routledge's manual nags kindly about pins, salts, and spare gloves. You fold so the rustle of silk whispers rather than scolds when opened by staff you've never met. Period magazines taught a packing order that prevents chaos from leaping out at customs. There's even room for a novel you're not supposed to enjoy and will. Tickets are class and covenant in one rectangle. First class quiet buys you fewer strangers and more scrutiny. Second is perfectly respectable with vigilance. Third requires a thicker skin and an even thicker coat. Respectability politics notices your choice and then watches how you carry it. No apologies if you economize, no swagger if you don't. Castle's guide counsels simple nouns at the window, 2 to bath, because fussily prescribed behavior hates narratives at the counter. The calling card snap in your pocket becomes a mental metronome. Purchase, step aside, and let the queue breathe. On the platform, gendered manners choreograph space, so collisions become courtesies instead of headlines. Gentlemen shelter ladies from passing wheels. Umbrellas tilt like punctuation marks that never stab. Children are kept from rehearsing tragedies near edges. Conduct culture turns porters into ambassadors, and coins pass like secrets, not announcements. You control optics by standing where drafts won't argue with your hat, and where you're findable by the person meant to find you. Even waiting has manners. You share a bench with your belongings and your patience, evenly divided. Compartment etiquette is a portable version of hushed drawing rooms where the upholstery is older and the witnesses more alert. You greet the carriage with a nod, not a manifesto, and claim a corner without unfurling your biography. Windows negotiate by consensus, an inch for air that doesn't fling cinders into anyone's book, closed when an elder's throat votes no. Conversation lanes are narrow but friendly. Roads, fields, period magazines, the orchestra of wheels underfoot. Conduct literature forbids oranges, unless you have a treaty with the peel. When the guard shouts, you don't sprint with porcelain. Pride heals slower than China. Luggage stowage is a test of physics and empathy. Your smaller case goes overhead with the grace that says you've practiced. The heavy trunk belongs to the guard's van with a label that behaves like scripture. You never colonize a neighbor's knees with parcels just because the timetable failed to respect ambition. Routledge's manual recommends a light shawl within reach for drafts and discretion. Anchor for naps, curtain for letters. The kid leather scent of gloves keeps hands from becoming a story, while you adjust straps in silence. Rulebook existence thrives on these tiny mercies that save tempers miles later. Refreshment rooms are brief parliaments where tea negotiates with time. The clink of teaspoons is softer than in drawing rooms, but just as bossy. You queue without size and choose food that doesn't recruit witnesses, biscuits, slices that travel politely, never a drippy anything. Mrs. Beaton's advice is merciless about sauces on journeys because laundry is not a public service. You place gloves beside the plate, never in it, and thank with a sentence that can survive retelling by bored staff. If the whistle interrupts, you leave a cup rather than attempt heroics. Conduct culture rewards restraint more than thrift when crockery is involved. Telegrams and letters keep reputation breathing faster than trains. You wire ahead in nouns and mercy, delayed by fog. Stop arrive 9:40. and post a note to the hostess with your apology already ironed. Black-edged paper is for news you pray you're not carrying. Creamy stock is for arrangements. Postcards are for weather and safe jokes only. Period magazines preach brevity. Etiquette manuals demand legibility under vibration. You learn to brace your wrist and your tone simultaneously. In regimented life, a punctual message is better manners than a punctual person who failed to warn. Night travel is its own catechism of calm. You loosen what can be loosened, never surrendering to dishabille that would alarm a stranger at a sudden stop. Shawl, pin, small cushion, and self-possession form the kit. Chaperonage, if you can arrange it, is reputation insurance you'll never regret paying. Gendered manners still apply at midnight. No impromptu confidences. No tales that ask the dark to keep secrets. Castle's guide suggests counting rivets if sleep won't come. You treat the corridor like a quiet street, and pass through it as if your name preceded you. Mishaps are the syllabus you didn't sign up for. A missed connection earns a telegram and not a tirade. A broken strap becomes a lesson in knots and composure. A lost trunk calls for the porter's name written once and repeated kindly. Conduct culture expects you to solve small crises with lists and large ones with letters. Respectability politics will always remember whether your temper used its inside voice. The station clock is the only tyrant you're allowed to blame publicly. Arrivals test whether you can reassemble dignity at speed. You choose a cab from the rank, not the loudest driver. You state the address clearly and tip as if you've done this before without needing to say so. Hotels have their own social rules. You sign in the same hand you use for invitations, leave one's card for the manager as if the building keeps a tray, and never treat staff like furniture, even when exhausted. Daily propriety makes rooms ready for you faster than pleading does. The rustle of silk, the clink of teaspoons, and the first cool wash of water convince your nerves that civilization survived the journey. Travel, done by the book, teaches a secret. Conduct culture isn't there to make you stiff. It's there to keep strangers gentle long enough to become acquaintances. Victorian etiquette codes follow you onto platforms and into carriages so your name can arrive in one piece. And just beyond the hotel's polished threshold waits a different stage for the same script. Country house weekends where trunks are judged as sharply as talk, where outdoor games have their own social rules, and where the polite air smells less of coal and more of grass, while respectability politics keeps perfect score from the terrace. A country house invitation looks like a kindness and behaves like a contract. The envelope arrives with your name spelled correctly, date set like rails, and a penciled hint about trains that proves the host has read the timetable as closely as the gossip. Victorian etiquette codes turn that slip of paper into marching orders. Reply at once, confirm your route, and declare any dietary quirks without making them sound like personality. Flage's manual claps for punctuality. Cassell's guide nods when you include your hour of arrival, so the carriage isn't guessing at hedgerows. Respectability politics is already watching, quietly totting up who makes other people's lives easier. Packing is strategy disguised as patience. You choose gowns that cooperate with grass, boots that won't argue with gravel, and a wrap that can look church appropriate if Sunday weather sulks. Daily propriety prefers clothes that read, "Ready, not look at me," and the rustle of silk should whisper rather than broadcast across oak floors. Mrs. Beaton's advice haunts the list. Sewing kit, pins, smelling salts, a ribbon that can bribe a hat into obedience. Period magazines promise you'll need less than you think, then show silhouettes that say otherwise. Conduct literature is right about one thing. Leave space for a thank you present to travel back in one piece. Arrival is choreography with horses. You hand your card to the butler, not your coat. Names are confirmed without auditions, and you greet the hostess first because the script of respectability insists on hierarchy, even when the dogs are friendlier. Gendered manners keep your hands visible, and your voice warm. You are expected to look unflustered by distances that bullied your veil. Hushed drawing rooms smell of beeswax instead of coal smoke air, and gaslight halos give way to daylight that tells fewer lies. In this regimented life, the first 5 minutes buy you permission for the next 48. Your room introduces itself before anyone does. A fire thinks for you, the bell pull waits like a polite question, and a printed card lists hours: breakfast, drives, lawn tennis, dinner at 8. Etiquette manuals want you unpacked in 10 and rung once, never twice for assistance. Fussily prescribed behavior hates urgency that wears perfume. You read the timetable the way a local reads weather. Tea at 5 means appetite at 4. Rides at 10 means boots at 9. And the clink of teaspoons after dinner means music rather than debates. Rule-bound living doesn't micromanage you. It keeps everyone from colliding. Breakfast is the house's first test of your judgment. There are no place cards. You choose a small plate and an even smaller footprint. Conduct culture suggests you fetch for others before yourself, and leave the eggs visible for the next conscience. Castle's guide forbids hammering ham as if it owes you rent. Routledge's manual blesses toast that shares. Conversation rides the lightest subjects. Views, trains, last night's quartet, never budgets. Respectability politics notices who can find the marmalade, and a compliment without knocking anything over. Daylight amusements come with a manual that pretends to be a lawn. Croquet is smiling warfare, where the most dangerous guest wears the softest colors. You win with angles, not victory laps. Lawn tennis wants precision without acrobatics, especially when tight stays are writing their own commentary. Orcs are chaperoned just enough to keep the rumour mill unemployed. Field rides respect the least experienced seat. Period magazines praise a lady who can swing a racket and still look as if she's discussing periodicals. In a rulebook existence, the trick is to make energy look effortless and restraint look chosen. Luncheon may take the form of a picnic, which is logistics in fancy dress. Plates that travel politely outrank anything sourced, and a tart you can cut with a smile is better manners than any anecdote. Mrs. Beaton's advice plays quartermaster: napkins, fruit already negotiated with a knife, and lemonade that arrives before tempers. Social rules ask you to notice elders first, and appetites second, then help as if you were born telepathic. A shawl before it's requested, a seat before knees confess. Respectability politics adores competence that doesn't monologue. Afternoon returns everyone to hushed drawing rooms where the economy of attention runs on tea. The hostess pours. You decline only if a second tray is clearly en route. The clink of teaspoons keeps conversation from sprinting. Etiquette manuals love small talents offered briefly. A sketch of the view, a stanza recited without making the furniture nervous. Chess appears only if both minds consent. Cards only if the vicar isn't peering through the hydrangeas. Conduct literature warns against monopolizing the piano. The instrument is a bridge, not a pulpit. The calling card snap you hear in your head reminds you to thank later in ink for whatever delighted you now. Dressing bells are absolute. Evening clothes are punctuation, bold enough to be read across candles, quiet enough to let other people speak. Place cards reappear like boundaries you didn't know you missed, and the logic of knives resumes its jurisdiction. Gendered manners alternate neighbors course by course. You talk across, not along, so no one dines in exile. Routledge's manual still hates peas that travel. Cassell's guide still loves stories with clean exits. Respectability politics forgives nothing louder than laughter, and nothing longer than dessert. After dinner, the party splits by tradition and oxygen. Billiards and cigars become the men's portion. Music and parlor games invite the women to run the room at a softer decibel. Period magazines will pretend both sides are equal. Conduct literature knows the drawing room often carries the evening's real politics. If you play, play short. If you sing, sing once. If you talk, move others forward. Daily propriety rewards the guest who can rescue a faltering anecdote without signing their name to it. In this ritualized routine, your light touch leaves deeper prints. Mornings in the country include Sunday, and that adds pews to the choreography. Clothes dim by a shade. Ribbons behave. The walk to the village church repeats the city's Sabbath theatre with fresher air. Social rules draw introductions on the porch. At the let gate you acquire next week's callers by smiling at their mothers. Respectability politics is gentler where fields outnumber headlines, but it still does arithmetic. Your posture says grateful, your timing says considerate, and your silence says, "We can talk later." Departure etiquette begins before packing. You thank the hostess at breakfast and again at the door, then write that evening from town with specifics that prove attention. The strawberry tart, the mayor with opinions, the view that erased a headache. Tips passed discreetly to staff who made you look competent. Coins are folded, not displayed. The ledger of favors closes, and the next chapter opens on paper. Invitations answered, a small parcel sent, and perhaps a note to the person whose conversation made the terrace shorter. The country has done its arithmetic. Now the city will read the sum, and courtship, or its cooler cousin, alliance, tends to begin where hedges and card trays shook hands. You don't deity in this world. You enter a corridor of names where doors open only when announced. Victorian Etiquette Codes turn a glance into paperwork and a conversation into choreography. Daily propriety means the first question isn't, "Do you like me?" but "Who introduced us?" because social rules insist that affection wears a reference. The rustle of silk, the kid leather scent of gloves, and the faint coal smoke air at the porch are just scenery for a rule-book existence that treats feelings like fragile parcels. In this regimented life, timing is a virtue, and witnesses are insurance. You walk slower than your pulse, because the script of respectability prefers sentences that can be repeated without blushing. Introductions are legal tender. A hostess ferries names between islands. "Mrs. Ellery, may I present?" and only then does talk become safe to spend. Gendered manners require a micro-bow of consent before any invitation to walk, sit, or look at a print on the wall. Fussily prescribed behavior hates the sound of presumption. Routledge's manual calls this due form. You'll call it the toll that lets curiosity cross a bridge. Under gaslight halos, even a smile has a chaperone. When the bridge is well built, the first sentence doesn't wobble. Chaperones aren't obstacles, they're licenses. An aunt's shawl, or a matron's sewing hoop, is the soft authority that makes proximity respectable. Conduct culture expects you to speak in topics that travel well: books, exhibitions, the garden, while the clink of teaspoons from the sideboard keeps time. You learn to phrase questions like "open windows," not traps, because respectability politics measures how gently you handle "no." Castle's guide approves when you let silence breathe without fidgeting. The room notices who can be interesting without being greedy. Notes are arteries. Paper keeps the feeling alive between rooms. Thick stock, steady hand, ink that won't cry when folded. Etiquette manuals adore these details because they convert impulse into legible intent. Mrs. Beaton's advice quietly blesses brevity with specifics. Thank the walk, the air after the rain, the etching over the mantel that you pretended not to study. A letter that can be read aloud by a mother without anybody catching fire is the gold standard. Period magazines teach you where to place the date, where to prevent a blot, and where to leave the margin that says, "I know my lane." In rule-bound living, sincerity is formatted. Gifts are vocabulary with price tags. Flowers say season, books say mind, sweets say I'm 12, unless your mother likes them. Jewelry doesn't speak yet. It shouts, and shouting is for later. Social rules expect presents to enter through the family, not the pocket. The calling card snap under a ribbon keeps everything chaperone-friendly. Respectability politics punishes extravagance that arrives ahead of permission, and rewards thoughtfulness that looks easy. You're not buying affection. You're proving you know the language it prefers. Promenades are classrooms where feet teach reputations to behave. You walk three abreast, matron you, hopeful party, so remarks can land without turning private. Daily propriety prefers benches in sightlines and sentences in short loops. You leave room for birds, dogs, and retreat. Conduct literature recommends a pace that flatters conversation, not lungs, and a route that returns before rumor adjusts its hat. Gaslight halos aren't here, but the daylight is just as honest. A good promenade feels like a rehearsal for living in the same weather. Home visits are exams disguised as tea. You arrive during at-home hours, never empty-handed, never hungry, and your coat doesn't argue with the furniture. The parlor tests your ability to admire without appraising. What a clever placement of the fern, not, these curtains must have cost a fortune. Gendered manners keep you from monopolizing anyone who didn't invite monopoly. You pivot to siblings, elders, or the ridiculous dog as needed. Routledge's manual applauds when you leave on the quarter hour, not the hour. In hushed drawing rooms, restraint is the room's favorite perfume. Rumor is a currency you refuse to spend. Respectability politics will audition you with bait. Did you hear? Is it true? Your best answer praises prose. The paper's writer is elegant and changes the subject to a concert, a charity list, or Mrs. Beaton's newest seasonal council. Conduct culture doesn't need you to be pious. It needs you to be safe for absent people. The script of respectability remembers who lets fires die for lack of air. Later, that memory votes for you when you're not in the room. Declining is an art that keeps tomorrow intact. If a set on the dance card must be refused, you do it with cause and a remedy. Engaged for this one, but the gallop if you please. So dignity survives on both sides. If an invitation arrives crooked, wrong day, wrong place, you straighten it with paper the same afternoon. Cassell's guide teaches the sentence that closes without slamming. Regret exceedingly. Previous engagement. Daily propriety is less about saying, ah yes, than about letting no land softly. Elegance is harm avoided. Proposals in this ecosystem arrive like good architecture. Sound lines, no squeaks, and everyone can point to who signed off on which beam. They often begin with permission to write more frankly, then a father's quiet walk, then a room where the air behaves and witnesses are nearby but not intrusive. Jewelry appears only after calendars, not before. The ring is a summary, not the argument. Period magazines will romanticize. Etiquette manuals will schedule. You will breathe. Respectability politics prefers daylight and complete sentences, and it's right. Engagement changes the temperature of the house without changing the furniture. Visiting cards gain penciled edges. At-home day expands to hold congratulations. The ledger of notes doubles overnight. Gendered manners loosen a notch. You may walk longer, talk deeper, and sit nearer. But chaperonage doesn't evaporate, it thins. Conduct literature advises gratitude in specifics and humility in public. Routledge's manual starts whispering about bands and breakfasts. A clink of teaspoons keeps everyone from fainting of happiness. Rulebook existence learns a new refrain without changing key. Boundaries don't vanish, they change uniform. Walks can lengthen, but benches still prefer witnesses. Gifts can warm, but jewelry waits for vows. Letters can deepen, but privacy stays on the family's paper. Respectability politics will keep score on steadiness more than sparkle. When illness, mourning, or money complicates the script, you pass with patience rather than performance. And just beyond this corridor, the bands, the fittings, the invitations, the ritualized routine grows louder, turning feelings into timetables, and a breakfast into a public promise that tastes like pastry and permanence. Engagement changes the temperature of every room you enter without moving a single chair. You feel Victorian Etiquette Codes step closer, turning affection into a timetable and smiles into paperwork. Daily propriety starts counting minutes, not heartbeats, and social rules ask you to glow without generating heat. Respectability politics listens for steadiness in your voice before it applauds romance in your eyes. Nachen, Keken, one, for an easy. I bank runs the dugald for G. Words on, Wangshell, Hauptet, Sitzon. The script of respectability wants proof you can carry feeling inside a rulebook existence. You'll oblige not because you must, but because order lets happiness walk through hushed drawing rooms unbothered. The bands are the first public drumbeat, read on 3 Sundays, so objections can collapse politely before cake is ordered. Etiquette manuals prefer your presence without theatrics. Veil low, posture calm, gratitude measured like teaspoons. If a license replaces bans, conduct culture still wants courtesy to arrive early and linger quietly. Period magazines will gossip about sleeves, the vicar will care about names spelled correctly. Respectability politics attends every syllable, grading calm under daylight rather than gaslight halos. You leave the porch feeling ordinary on purpose, which is the point. Paper is your second altar, and stationery is theology with edges. Invitations obey wording older than most guests, with Routledge's manual guarding prepositions and Cassell's guide patrolling honorifics. Heavy stock signals confidence, clean type or legible hand signals competence. Both say the household minds its verbs. You announce ceremony time and wedding breakfast location without adding adjectives that start arguments. Fussily prescribed behavior insists replies return in days, not moods. A calling card snap you hear while stacking envelopes becomes the metronome of the next 6 weeks. Fittings translate decorum discipline into seams, which is to say into breathing that must not squeak. Tight stays negotiate a truce with ribs, while the rustle of silk rehearses its small applause. Your dressmaker knows which darts flatter sincerity, and which merely flatter, and conduct literature sides firmly with the former. Period magazines offer silhouettes that pretend to be modest, and are miraculously modest. You practice walking as if the gown were a sentence you can finish without gasping. Respectability politics will notice grace more than lace, which is cheaper anyway. Rings are sentences you wear, and they should read like good prose, not advertising. A simple band pleases the etiquette manuals because it remembers that jewelry is a summary, not the argument. You praise sentiment, not carrot, and let social rules do the math for anyone tempted to count. Gendered manners allow admiration that doesn't become a market report. In a regimented life, humility ages better than sparkle. The kid leather scent of your gloves keeps hands from becoming headlines during congratulations. Post multiplies, then multiplies again, and your desk becomes a polite sorting machine. Thank you notes travel within 24 hours, specific enough to prove attention and short enough to respect breath. Card trays glow with rectangles. Corner folds whisper congratulations and future at home days. The calling card snap becomes muscle memory. Daily propriety expects you to accept the right teas and decline the wrong late nights without bruising anyone's pride. The clink of teaspoons marks progress better than any clock you own. Respectability politics forgives almost anything that arrives on time and in ink. Guest lists are arithmetic with feelings attached, and you solve for harmony before quantity. Families propose names, rooms impose ceilings, and social rules remind you to seat old quarrels as far apart as upholstery allows. Mrs. Beaton's advice murmurs about menus that travel politely from plate to memory. The butler calculates how many napkins can fold without mutiny. You weigh alliances beside staircases and decide who can survive candles near who. Cassell's guide blesses precedents that keeps tempers from shaking hands. In rule-bound living, the chart is the peace treaty. Rehearsal is the housebreaking of nerves and nouns. You walk the aisle as if it were a sentence that knows where to stop, and ushers learn to become useful punctuation. The vicar times vows to breaths you genuinely have, not breaths a novelist wishes you had. Conduct culture assigns small jobs to relatives who need them, because doing prevents meddling. Etiquette manuals insist on cues you can follow, even if the organist sneezes. Respectability politics applauds when everyone appears inevitable rather than choreographed. The ceremony day tastes of soap, starch, and a little coal smoke air that snuck in on boots. Hushed drawing rooms spill into pews, and gendered manners keep aisles clear for feelings to walk down the center without tripping. You arrive on time, suspense belongs to fiction, not sacraments, and you speak in complete sentences with a voice that trusts itself. Tight stays remind you to stand as if vows had spine. Period magazines will later describe your sleeves. Your grandmother will remember your kindness to the child who dropped a program. The ritualized routine holds steady so tenderness can show its face. The wedding breakfast is a social engine that runs on pastry and restraint. Courses behave. Knives mind their lanes. Toasts are short enough to keep steam in the eggs and long enough to let gratitude ride the room. Daily propriety asks you to laugh at the right pitch and eat enough to prove you're human. Respectability politics prefers brightness to loudness and simplicity to spectacle. Period magazines will call it taste. The clink of teaspoons becomes applause when words would make a mess. Departure is theatre with luggage, and you edit it for dignity. A going-away dress reads present tense rather than final chapter, and the cab door closes without recruiting tears. You tip as if you'll meet these faces again, which you will, and you post your first thank yous from the first station. Conduct literature asks for a gift ledger that balances before you sleep. Cassell's guide wants notes that can be read aloud without translating you. The rulebook existence isn't trying to smother joy, it's protecting it from drafts. Gaslight halos recede. Timetables take over. Calm stays on. What follows is the quiet astonishment of building a life that can host its own days without wobbling, where etiquette manuals move from courtship shelf to housekeeping drawer, and Mrs. Beaton's advice starts sounding like common sense. You'll learn how daily propriety turns rooms into allies, how social rules protect privacy as well as pride, and how ritualized routine lets affection survive errands. Respectability politics won't stop peering through the keyhole, but your steadiness will make it blink first. Clink of teaspoons will trade places with doorbells, and the calling card snap will set the house heartbeat. Somewhere between the ledger and the lamplight, you'll find that the script of respectability can keep a home warm when the world outside forgets its manners. There are days when the kindest thing you can do for your reputation and your nerves is to disappear correctly. Victorian Etiquette Codes give you a quiet script for that. Fewer doorbells, more paper. Fewer rooms, more rest. Daily propriety begins with a sentence the footman can repeat without adding heat. Not at home today, but the family is grateful for your card. That line lowers the temperature of a whole street. In a rulebook existence, absence is not a void. It's a boundary with manners. Illness changes the calendar before it changes the body. You send 3 notes first. 1 to the hostess expecting you, 1 to the neighbor who helps, 1 to the clergy who will carry the news farther than you can. Etiquette manuals insist on brevity that can be read in a doorway. Conduct literature prefers clarity over drama. Respectability politics will still tap at the window, so you make the message steady. Behind closed doors, the clink of teaspoons becomes healthcare's metronome, and even the kettle learns to speak softly. Inside the house, rooms learn new jobs. Hushed drawing rooms become convalescent spaces, where voices step lightly, and the rustle of silk behaves like a lullaby. Curtains are drawn not to banish the world, but to prevent it from taking up space it didn't pay for. Mrs. Beaton's advice quietly reorders the pantry. Broths, barley water, dry biscuits that travel politely to a weak stomach. Cassell's guide reminds you that pity is exhausting, comfort is practical. You learn the difference before noon. Visitors shrink to the size of kindness. Gendered manners keep husbands protective and aunts efficient, but no one crosses a threshold without permission. A 5-minute call at the door with a bouquet and a calling card snap is better than a generous hour that steals breath. In this regimented life, time is the civility you can most afford to lavish. Period magazines will later praise delicate consideration, which is code for you didn't make it about you. A line-in asks for lace on the boundary rather than lace on the cradle. Household rhythm narrows to the mother, the child, and the nurse. Everyone else lives by notes. Conduct culture converts affection into logistics. Fires kept even, stairs tread like apologies, meals planned to arrive before hunger becomes a scold. Routledge's manual would approve of this ritualized routine, not because it's pretty, but because it keeps people from tripping over each other. In a script of respectability, tenderness is scheduled on purpose. Paper carries the weight speaking can't. Announcements of birth or declining health travel on thick stock that doesn't wilt, black edges if needed, and addresses written in a hand that doesn't wobble. Etiquette manuals care, because paper becomes witness when memory turns creative. Respectability politics stops peering quite so hard when it finds every name spelled correctly and every envelope sealed like a promise. Even coal smoke air in the hall seems to wait its turn when the post leaves on time. Morning has grammar, and you follow it to keep grief from having to improvise. Clothes dim from day to day, jet beads behave, and the kid leather scent of gloves stays between you and the world, so touch doesn't become a headline. Fussily prescribed behavior can feel cold until it saves you from a conversation you couldn't have. The rule-bound living proves merciful when choices are few. Veils down for the road, up for reading lips at the service, letters answered in batches, before guilt invents new chores. Hospitality doesn't disappear, it changes shape. Tea still pours, but cups meet saucers without chatter. Biscuits arrive without opinions. Daily propriety trims conversation to sentences that can survive retelling to the bereaved. I remember her laugh. He never missed a market morning. In hushed drawing rooms, the clink of teaspoons is not filler. It's permission to breathe. Period magazines may discuss morning jewelry. You worry about chairs and silence. Both have their place, and you curate them like a caretaker with keys. Rumor always knocks, and you decline to open. Respectability politics will try to pry. Was there a doctor's mistake? Didn't someone say? You admire the prose of the paper, praise the weather's sudden decency, and let the question dissolve in its own heat. Conduct literature is blunt on this point. Feeding speculation is a breach of daily propriety, because it steals tomorrow's peace to pay for today's story. You keep your ledger balanced by starving the noise. Servants need instructions that outlive fatigue. You give one sentence for the door. The family thanks you for your card. One for deliveries, please leave items on the table, we will write. And one for invitations, we are not receiving. That toolkit stabilizes a hallway with more traffic than you can track. Mrs. Beaton's advice would add broth schedules. Cassell's guide would add names to thank later. In a regimented life, kindness is most convincing when it's legible. Re-entry is a staircase, not a spring. You begin with notes without edges, then 5-minute calls, then tea for two, then an at-home day that ends an hour earlier than usual. Clothes lightened by a breath, conversation by an ounce. Etiquette manuals will let you set your own pace once intent is clear. The city learns you again a little at a time, and that's how it should be. You're not the same house that closed. You shouldn't pretend to be. And when the door finally stays open without effort, you notice something you couldn't see from inside. Victorian etiquette codes were never just gates. They were handrails. They kept strangers gentle, friends organized, and wounds out of circulation long enough to knit. Which raises the next, quieter question. The one period magazines rarely printed and conduct literature only hinted at. How the code bends without breaking when new fashions, faster posts, and louder streets start knocking with modern impatience. Modernity doesn't kick the door in. It loosens a hinge. You notice it when period magazines praise a woman who cycles, for health, while wearing a veil that minds its own business. and Kranks. Canvas Frank back. The first bicycle you try feels like a loophole on two wheels, and yet the Victorian etiquette codes keep pace. Gloves on, speed modest, greetings intact. Daily propriety shifts from not done to done if done properly, and the street, still dusted with coal smoke air, learns to treat bloomers as exercise, not declaration. Respectability politics blinks, then decides a chaperoned ride looks safer than a hacking cough in a crowded omnibus. In rule-bound living, progress arrives wearing a hat pin. Clothing follows motion, and motion edits manners. Tight stays negotiate truce with ribs for tennis and cycling, and the rustle of silk yields daylight to serge and linen that forgive fresh air. Etiquette manuals quietly update themselves. Routledge manual concedes that comfort can be respectable if seams behave. Castle's guide blesses jackets that look brisk rather than loud. Gendered manners rephrase touch around new activities. Steadying a saddle is help, not license. A fallen hat is an errand, not an anecdote. The script of respectability survives because decorum discipline proves portable. You discover that practical is not the enemy of proper. Reading changes rooms without moving a chair. Subscription libraries become hushed drawing rooms with sterner furniture, and conduct culture follows you into the stacks. You sign for novels that conduct literature pretends to frown at, then discuss them in voices that never disturb catalogue cards. Period magazines offer improving lists, and you smuggle a little appetite between the lines. Daily propriety nods if you return books on time, and don't annotate life in the margins. Respectability politics decides that a woman with a library ticket looks less dangerous than a woman with time. The clink of teaspoons begins to sound like punctuation in a larger paragraph of ideas. Shopping acquires elevators, mirrors, and jurisdiction. Department stores turn browsing into a public act you can perform without a chaperone, provided your posture pays the bill. You learn the polite physics of lifts: eyes front, hats steady, conversation thin as cable. Fussily prescribed behavior forbids pawing displays, and returns travel by letter first, because paper keeps tempers dressed. Mrs. Beeton's advice, usually a kitchen oracle, becomes a purse whisperer. Lists, exact change, and a resolve never to buy a sauce that needs witnesses. Respectability politics discovers that credit, paid punctually, is the most modest advertisement of all. Photography gives visiting cards faces, and faces give card trays opinions. You sit for a portrait that looks gentle in the eyes and modest at the neckline. Studios stock shawls for repentance and palms for prosperity. An image tucked behind a calling card tells a quieter story than gossip can invent, and the calling card snap becomes a duet with the shutters click. Social rules start reading backdrops like resumes, books suggest mind, ferns suggest means, and you begin to curate surroundings the way you used to curate sentences. In a regimented life, optics become a dialect of truth. The post and the wire accelerate everything except forgiveness. Telegrams compress duty into nouns. Postcards carry weather, not confidences. Letters still bear the weight of feeling, because ink remembers better than electricity. Routledge Manual now praises brevity you can read in a doorway, and Cassell's guide nags the legibility out of your hand. You learn to warn a hostess from the junction, to rescue an at-home day with 12 words, and to apologize before a carriage can. Daily propriety, once paced by the clink of teaspoons, now also keeps time by the tapping of telegraph keys. Conduct culture discovers that speed without tone is merely noise. Clubs and societies widen rooms without knocking down walls. Charity committees evolve into debating circles and lecture evenings, where a respectable matron might quote statistics between the rustle of silk and a firm good night. Gendered manners still install chaperones, but questions from the floor are suddenly allowed to be brave if sentences are tidy. Period magazines print lectures alongside recipes, and Mrs. Beeton's advice ceases to sound shocked about it. Respectability politics watches the door, then the clock, then decides the city will not collapse if women leave with ideas as well as invitations. Ritualized routine stretches like good fabric. Work tiptoes into conversation and then sits down. Governess was always printable. Now, shop assistant, typist, even journalists thread their way into hushed drawing rooms. Conduct literature teaches how to speak of wages without turning tea into a ledger. Useful, steady, for family. And daily propriety moves a chair to make space. You still leave one's card. You still thank in ink. You still speak kindly to the doorman because respectability politics takes notes in the hall. Rulebook existence bends here, not because it wants to, but because the rent is persuasive. Domestic technology alters the timetable and your tone. Doorbells standardize calling hours. Gas stoves shorten tempers in kitchens that used to simmer. Hot water pipes make morning calls less heroic in January. Cassell's guide updates lamp advice with mantles and matches, and Mrs. Beaton's advice learns to trust a timer. The decorum discipline you once spent on coaxing fires, you now spend on managing calendars. Hushed drawing rooms remain, but their silence feels chosen rather than enforced. The house breathes in a new key, and nobody faints. Newspapers grow teeth and gossip learns to sprint. Divorce cases, theatre rows, political wives, names jump from rumour to print, and the city reads at breakfast. Respectability politics tightens its hat and teaches you a fresh defence. Admire the writing, refuse the morsel, change the subject to the exhibition in the next column. Period magazines offer do-nots that boil down to mercy. Conduct literature calls it good breeding, when you let a headline die. Daily Propriety learns that starving scandal is cheaper than repairing it. Bicycles and books didn't kill the code. They made it earn its keep. The script of respectability proves it can travel, read, and breathe without losing its grammar. And you learn a trick you didn't expect. The more fluent you are, the more you can bend without breaking. A glove remains a treaty. A bow remains a bridge. A note remains a door you can open later. Rule-bound living turns out to be a toolkit, not a cage. The kid leather scent, the calling card snap, the clink of teaspoons. They become a soundtrack you can remix. And there's the quiet lesson you keep. Progress lands better when it says, please, and stays for tea. You move faster without stepping on toes, think louder without raising your voice, and let new habits borrow old manners so the city doesn't panic. Victorian etiquette codes look less like chains and more like handrails when streets get crowded, which, conveniently, brings you to the perfect threshold for a fresh beginning. What it actually felt like to live with this whole grammar humming under your skin, every hour, in every room, one practiced breath at a time. You've walked a city where paper had manners, rooms had memory, and a single pause could change your name. By now you can hear how Victorian etiquette codes weren't only chains. They were handrails, sometimes too tight, sometimes life-saving. Daily propriety tuned the day like a clock. Social rules kept strangers legible. Conduct culture turned small courtesies into crowd control. Under gaslight halos and coal smoke air, the script of respectability asked you to translate kindness into timing. And when timing failed, the clink of teaspoons stepped in like a metronome for nerves. You learned to read the room and the tray. Calling cards snap as punctuation, corner folds as verbs. You felt decorum discipline in your shoulders, tight stays do that, and in your hands, kid leather scent turning touch into treaty. Etiquette manuals, Routledge's manual, Castle's guide, and Mrs. Beaton's advice were less about fussily prescribed behavior than about preventing collisions between classes, tempers, and expectations. Rule-bound living can be exhausting. Regimented life can also be merciful when the alternative is chaos with teeth. The rule-book existence, for better and worse, made thousands of tiny decisions, so a few big ones could stand up straight. It's easy to laugh at teaspoons and corner folds until you notice how they protected people who had the least room to maneuver. Chaperones could be gatekeepers, but also shields. Not at home could be a snub, but also a boundary that saved a tired heart. Respectability politics was real, and often cruel. Still, within that pressure, women learned to bend the code without breaking their names. Shorter visits, kinder exits, letters that closed wounds without opening new ones. Conduct literature didn't print that part. Experience did. Now, tilt the mirror forward. Where do you still meet these rules? Different costumes, same choreography. Office calendars that function like at-home days. Group chats that behave like card trays. Comments that need a chaperone. Moments that need a chaperone. Which habit from that world would actually help yours tomorrow? Choosing the seat that buys time. Writing the note that mends a misstep. Letting a rumor starve for lack of an audience. Maybe the most modern move is the oldest one. Say less, mean more. And let your paper do the walking. History lands best when it gets under your skin. So ask yourself, which moment surprised you? Which detail you can almost smell? The coal smoke air in the hall, the rustle of silk in hushed drawing rooms, the exact weight of a coin folded into a porter's palm. What will you try this week? Fewer apologies, clearer boundaries, or a calmer pace that refuses someone else's emergency? Small rituals make crowded lives gentler. They always did. If this journey gave you new eyes for old rules, pass it on. Share the video with someone who loves hidden mechanics or keeps bumping into invisible lines. Tap, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next deep dive. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I read them, and I weave your places into future stories. Thanks for walking London's long corridors of manners with me. Sleep easy. The city's bells can ring without you for a while.